Radhe Krishna, myself B.Ed, third sem trainee, and today I am going to take your class in the subject Science and Technology, which we will be discussing about some topics in it with the help of some slides which are made on the PowerPoint presentations, also known as the PPTs. Today we are going to discuss about the subject Science and Technology, in which we will go thoroughly about the standard 6th book, which is as chapter number 15 and NCERT Science and Technology book. That means its publishers or the book which comes also under the NCERT. Thus, here we are going to discuss about the chapter number 15 of standard 6th. The name of the chapter number 15 of standard 6th is Air Around Us. By hearing the word air, what do you mean? In your own words, as air. That means, do you think that without the taking air inhaling inside you, you would be able to take a breath, or you would be able to live as you are right now? No, absolutely no. As we all know, without air or life, not only air but also all the lives all over the world or on this earth is not possible at all. So here today we are going to discuss about the air around us, which is also the name of our chapter. So in our next slide, as we can see, here are some fukuris. They are of different shapes and sizes. In the very first fukuri, we can see that red and green as well yellow color is mixed, and its shape is different from the second one, and also the third one's shape is different from the second one. In short, all three fukuris are different from each other, but when the air is surpassed from them, or when air comes across them, they start moving too fastly when the wind is too fast. But when air is not so fast, they remain in a steady or in a stable position. In the same way, we can see in our next PPT that making a simple fukri. Here we had to learn, or we had known, that how the simple fukri can be made. As we can see here that making a simple fukri, that is, even with the help of simple papers, it's not necessary that you should use colorful papers for making it. You can even use notebook papers or rough papers for making these fukuris. As a child, we all had did this, and also as you are in standard 6th, you too would be making it in your free times, isn't it? Obviously. So here we can make these fukuris with the help of simple papers by just following the steps which are given in the textbook. Now in our next PPT, is air present everywhere around us? Is the biggest question which has been asked in the textbook. So let's see whether it's around us or not with some proofs. Now the very first point in it is, take empty open bottle. We have to take an empty bottle, and then second point is it really empty or does it have something inside? It's the question which has been asked to us about this experiment. Now the third point is, turn it upside down. Here we have to follow this statement, as we had already taken one open bottle which was empty. So now here, turn it upside down. We have to turn its upside or its mouth in the down or in the down towards form. is something inside it, and by doing so we have to see whether something is inside it or not. Now after that, experiment with an empty bottle. We can say it as here. Now dip the open mouth of the bottle into the bucket filled with water as shown in the above coming figure, which we will be seeing as in this slide. We can see here as one empty bottle is taken and it is filled, or it has been dropped in a backward form in the bucket filled with water. But in the first one only some bubbles are seen, and on the second one lots of bubbles are seen, as the bottle was not empty, it was filled with air, and now we are trying to fill water in it, so all the air formations are coming out of this bottle in the form of bubbles. Yes, absolutely. Now here, now dip the bottle open mouth of bottle into the bucket filled with water as shown in the above coming figures. Now the second point is, observe the bottle. Does water enter the bottle? Also, after that, what we had discussed just now, does water enters the bottle? It was the question. Do you see bubbles coming out of the bottle or hear any bubbles sound? Obviously, if we will practice, or if we will do the same experiment in a full concentration way, then we will be able to see the bubbles coming out of it. Also, if we will try to hear some sounds, then we will see it in a very deep and as well as in a clear form. So the next point is as, yes, you are right. Obviously we are right. Why? It is air that was present in the bottle, as I had said, with the help of these bottles PPTs. Now here, as we can see, yes, you are right, it is air that was present in the bottle. The bottle was not empty at all. In fact, it was filled completely with air even when you turned it upside down. That is why you notice that water does not enter the bottle when it is pushed in an inverted position, as there was no space for air to escape. When the bottle was tilted, the air was able to come out in the form of bubbles. The water filled up the empty space that the air has occupied, as we had already seen that the bottle was empty, and when we kept that bottle in a bottom side form with the filled of water, then the bubbles started coming out of the water or out of the bottle's form. So here from this we had known that as bottle was not empty, it was filled with bubbles. That means it was filled with air, and when air came out of it, it converted, or it forms into a form of bubbles. Now let's move towards next experiment or next examples, which is given as in our next slide. Here this man is going up, we can say it as higher and higher, as it is mountainous company's oxygen cylinder. When we go higher and higher, as examples such as when we go on the mountains or any such places which are much higher, then at that time we have to take cylinder which is or which should be filled of oxygen. Then only we will be able to survive on that highest place, as we already know that on the highest places oxygen's level is very low. So let's move towards our next PPT. What is air made up of? Until the 18th century, people thought that air was just one substance. Experiments have proved that it is really not so. Air is a mixture of many gases. What kind of mixture it is? Let us find out about some of the major components of this mixture one by one. As we had seen that air has oxygen. Obviously it has oxygen, as we all know that we can also know it by this experiment, as in this experiment one table on which candles are kept which are burning, and then we are keeping a glass tumbler on the burning tables. By doing so, when we will remove that tumblers, or we can see that when we will remove that glasses from the candles which are burning, then that candles will be lifted off. That means they will be absolutely not burning when we will open that glass after few seconds or after a minute. So here we can see that the air has oxygen in it. Now the next one is, as we can see that in a closed room with the hole in a door, there is a light which is coming inside in a white form, observing presence of dust in air with sunlight. Here, as we already are seeing that from the hole white lights are coming, so that white lights are not just lights, there are number of or millions of small particles which we are not able to see through our naked eyes or through our own eyes. As for seeing that, we needed some scientific equipments as well as some such telescopes, or maybe nearly to some of the type of things, because of which we will be able to see such dust particles, as there are microscopes for seeing small particles, but for seeing dust there are also rarely most of, or we can even say at it as there are many other equipments which we can help us seeing in that. Now let's move towards our next PPT. In this we can see that as a traffic officer is pushing his hands, and on his face there is a mask. Why it is so? We can see it clearly that when we drive vehicles, lots of carbon dioxide, nitrogens, as well as the airs which are we left or which we bought out of from our vehicles, or after driving vehicles, what do we actually move. So as we had seen that the policeman is wearing the mask on his face, on behind of the red car. From this we can observe it clearly that as the pollution has increased so much, due to which on the roads it is impossible to walk without wearing mask, because all the dust and that all particles, polluted particles, when it goes inside our bodies, our body becomes such a type of inagitates, because of which we start getting suffocations, and there are various other diseases which starts occurring due to the polluted airs inhalations. Now after that we can see it that in the form of all charts, or in a graphical form, combinations of air, as in short we can say it as in our textbook 15.9 we can see at it as clearly composition of air, in which oxygen is of green part, in which it is colored as a green part, and the red one which is it is not red, I think, yeah, it is not a red one, it is absolutely pink one, as carbon dioxide, water vapor and the other gases are shown by the pink color form, and else than that all the other particles from this graph are nitrogen. That means we can see that the proportion of nitrogen is much more higher than the proportion of oxygen on our planet Earth. Now let's move towards our next experiment, which is as water conducts air. If we will ask to someone that does water has air, then they are absolutely going to say that no, obviously it doesn't has. But when we boil water, at that time we can see that there in that water bubbles start coming out. That means when that water gets heats and temperatures, it turns into the forms of vapors, and also before that bubbles comes out of that vessel. Why does it happens? Because there are still little bit form of air are filled within or mixed with that water. So when we put that water into a vessel, then the formations of air starts coming out of that water, and it can be seen in the forms of little bit bubbles as well as in the little bit small shoals on in the vessels. Now after that, as we can see, even the sand has air in it. How can we say that? By doing it or by knowing it, we can take a handful of sand, and in that we can put some water, then after a second or two we can observe that this water, when we had kept or put it into the sand, then that soil or sand becomes clay or little bit, what we can say, that is wetted with the water. But at the same time we can see that little bit or small particles such as bubbles or as well as some gaseous types, it starts coming out of that particle which comes out of such sand is known as the soil. Now after that, let's move towards, as we already know, wind will moves only by the help of air. If air is surrounded speedily, or if it is more, or if the speed of the air is highly, then the windmill falls or it runs in a very fast way. Now from this, let's see what are the keywords which we have learned today. Here the keywords, very first was atmosphere, and then carbon dioxide, after that composition of air, then oxygen, then nitrogen and smoke, and in the last one, windmill, which we can see over here, as this is known as a windmill which runs only when the wind comes faster or in a speedily way, then only it gets moved from its proportions and it turns into a circular form. And later on, let's see or move towards our next. So here our chapter completes, and now let's move towards the summary. So what we have learned through this whole chapter today in our class. So very first point which we have learned today is air is found everywhere. Obviously we had seen it that air is found everywhere around us. We cannot see air, but we can feel it. Yes, it's absolutely correct, and as we have learned and seen throughout our discussions, that we cannot see air but we can feel it. Now the next point which we have learned today is air in motion is called wind. Yes, it is. And then third point, air occupies space. Obviously we had seen it with the help of that bottles experiment, as when we had kept that empty bottle into the water, then the bubbles started coming out. That means air occupies space. So this point also we had discussed thoroughly. Now the next point, in air is present in water and soil. Yes. And then what we had discussed, air is a mixture of nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide, water vapor and a few other gases. Some dust particles may also be present in it. Okay, it's absolutely correct. And then after that we have learned about oxygen supports burnings and is necessary for living organisms. Obviously we can't imagine our life or living happily or even taking a single breath without the absence or in the absence of oxygen. So for living beings or living organisms, oxygen is must, as water is must. In the same way, oxygen is also must for living organisms. The envelope of air that surrounds the earth is known as atmosphere. Yes, we have learnt it too. Now the next point which we have learnt is atmosphere is essential for life on earth. Yes. Aquatic animals use dissolved air in water for respiration. And the last point of our today's class, which we had learned from the whole discussion, is plants and animals depend on each other for exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide from air. Obviously we had seen it that plants and animals depends on each other for exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide from air, as animals gives, and we can say it as plants gives us oxygen, and all the other organisms as well as animals gives them back as a carbon dioxide. So they are exchanging each other oxygen as well as carbon dioxide for having a substantial, or as well as we can say it as for having a life on this earth. So here ends our today's discussion. I hope you all had understood this concept very clearly, and also you all had liked studying this chapter today with me. So here ends our today's class. Thank you and Radhe Radhe, and also take care.